Okay, so I presume that you have already digested now what we have discussed previously. Just in a while. So you have your first learning activity. Okay, so A, compute the CPI in 2011, and B, what was the CPI inflation rate from 2011 to 2012? So I am going to make a submission link in Moodle and you have to submit your answer. So tanan ninyong activity in this lesson should be submitted on that particular submission link. Okay, so this is your first active learning 1. Calculate the CPI. Okay? Okay, so this figure shows how the typical consumer divides spending among various categories of goods and services their income. Now, the Bureau of Labor Statistics calls each percentage the relative importance of the category. So if you notice, housing comprises the largest percentage of importance or the relative of importance. And this is based on research by Bureau of Labor Statistics, or you can check on their website http www.bls.gov/cpi/. Now this graph shows just a few highlighted highly aggregated categories. Now a more detailed breakdown is available at the BLS website. Just look for relative importance of components in the consumer price index and you will find it there. Okay? Okay, so you now know how to calculate the CPI. Let's discover then the problems with calculation of the CPI. Remember that the goal of the Consumer Price Index is to measure changes in the cost of living. In other words, the Consumer Price Index tries to gauge how much the income must rise to maintain a constant standard of living. But the Consumer Price Index, however, is not a perfect measure of the cost of living. 3 problems with the index are widely acknowledged but seems like a difficult thing to solve. Now, the first one is substitution bias. Okay? Okay, so when prices change from one year to the next, they do not all change proportionately, diba? Dili bi agad tanan. So, some prices rise more than the others. So there are products that their prices rise more than the other products. Now, consumers respond to these differing price changes by buying less of the goods whose prices have risen by relatively large amounts, and by buying more of the goods whose prices have risen less or perhaps even have fallen. So there are also instances wherein the price of a particular product over a period of time has fallen, diba? And that is, consumers substitute towards goods that have become relatively less expensive. Since a consumer is a rational thinker, of course, he would favor goods that has a relatively less price than those other goods. So, for example, If a price index is computed assuming a fixed basket of goods, it ignores the possibility of consumer substitution and therefore overstates the increase in the cost of living from one year to the next. Diba? Kay ang CPI, di ba, we have already discussed that the CPI is computed assuming a fixed basket of goods. So therefore, it ignores no, the possibility of the consumer substitution. Kay, say for example, imagine that in the base year, no, apples are cheaper than pears. So consumers, of course, would buy more apples than pears. When the BLS construct the basket of goods, it will include more apples than pears. Nga naman, di ba yun ko beforehand that the price of the goods in which the typical consumer buys more, ang presyo nga goods would be given more weight in computing the CPI. So, kung ang apple has lower price compared to pears, so, inig-construct no, sa BLS, sa basket of goods, it will include more apples. Ang price sa apples than the pears. Kay mas barato man ang apples, mas daghan man na apples ang i-include sa usa ka consumer sa iyang basket of goods. But what if supposedly that next year the pears are cheaper than the apples? Of course, in reality, consumers will naturally respond to the price change, diba? As rational thinkers, we opt to buy goods and services that have lower prices than those that have higher prices. Given naman jud na. Di man jud na ikalalis, diba? So naturally, the consumer respond to the price changes by buying more pears and fewer apples. Yet, in computing the consumer price index, the BLS uses a fixed basket, which in essence assumes that the consumer continue buying the now expensive apples in the same quantities as before. No? Now, na for this reason, the index will measure a much larger increase in the cost of living than consumers actually experience. So, mauna siya ang one problem with the computation of CPI. Okay? Okay, another